Well, this must go back then to, as you said, the brain development science and the fact that young people don't handle alcohol as their adult counterparts do. Dr. Cataldi, could you talk to us about that? As a former coroner and as an addiction specialist, what do you know? What does the science tell us about the way that alcohol affects the brains of young people?
Well, in numerous arenas, but the most important thing to realize is that children probably have a greater euphoric effect. They feel better when they take a drink than most adults do. That's just the way your neurological system is, and they have less bad feelings. Well, they may throw up and everything, but the brain itself has been rewarded. And we know the reason for that is that, as you said earlier, the brain doesn't develop. As a matter of fact, not only does it develop until age 20, and some people, I wonder, if it isn't longer than that, than Peter Pan's and Cinderellas of the world, but it doesn't develop, but you see spurts of development. You don't just develop your brain straightforward. For girls at about age 11, they get a lot of gray matter, the thinking stuff. And then for boys at about age 12, 12 and a half, they get a lot of gray matter. And it's very disconcerting because when you're telling me when, gosh, they're starting to drink at 11 and 12, that's the prime time to not only do damage to the brain, but also hardwire the brain. And what I mean by that is the way people learn things is they do something, they study, they make a good grade, they feel good. But if they're taking a chemical in, like you're saying at 4 o'clock, they drink, they feel good. No need to study now. So the gray matter interacts with what we call the white matter, or the cables, and the next thing you know, you're hardwired that drinking is the way to go. We know that 50% of the adult alcoholics started drinking before age 15, and 90% of the adult alcoholics started drinking before age 18. So we know chemically, neurologically, something has happened in those age groups when they drink that is promoting an ongoing problem. Not just an ongoing problem. A kid who drinks, like you said, at age 12 has a 4 times incidence of having a problem with alcohol in adulthood. Now, 10% of the people already have a problem, so now we're at 40%. You just gave your kid a drink to teach him how to drink socially or successfully, and you just increased his chances of becoming an alcoholic by 4 times. You just put your kid's future. You know, to me, that's just incongruous with good parenting. That's not good parenting. And one of the reasons, you know, you said, should we feel guilty because at age 18, when we were coming up, it was okay to drink. Well, it may have been okay legally to drink, but we know, carrying it forward, that a lot of people had problems. But, you know, when I was 18, it was also, I had physicians telling me that it's good to smoke. We were wrong. So we were wrong then. The data that we've learned, the progress that we made, hopefully we can pass on to our children and they can benefit what science has taught us.
Well, that's very interesting, the statistic that you quoted that said that the younger the person starts to drink, the more likely they are to become dependent. So these, you know, parents who feel like there's really not that big of a problem with having a glass of wine or two with their teenager in their own homes, or in fact, maybe escorting their own children down the road to dependence at some point.
You're putting your child at risk by giving them a chemical which by definition is neurotoxic, toxic to your nervous system.
Well, now we know what parents should not do, but let's talk about what parents should do. What can we as parents do to encourage our children to wait until they're 21 before drinking when they're faced with messaging from the media, with pressure from their peers, with other parents offering them alcohol? How do we counter that?
Definite things that parents and families can do. 4 steps really, and I like to boil it down to 4 steps. I do this when I talk to parenting organizations. Number 1, they can educate their kids, and we know education is a small part of it, but an important part of it. You know, teach them about the consequences, the legal consequences, which is what our judge was talking about, the social-emotional consequences, the biological consequences. You know, teach your kids, tell them what those potential outcomes could be. Secondly, parents can set expectations, and we know that kids tend to work up to expectations. So the higher your expectations, the better. Set boundaries. You know, even though parents may want to be their kids' friend, sometimes you have to be the parent. You have to be the one to help them make the decision, or to teach them why that particular decision is important. But set boundaries. It's okay to have boundaries as a parent. It's okay to have expectations as a parent. Role model. And this goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. You know, sometimes you have to show kids that you can do things occasionally without alcohol, you know. Show them how to behave responsibly and how to, and why responsible use as an adult is important and why underage use is, non-use is so important. You know, be sure that the kids understand through your actions. And finally, monitoring, and this is the big one. You know, this is one we tell parents all the time. If you monitor, and by monitoring, it's not just watching everything they do, but it's being aware of what's going on in the child's life in general, you know. Doing things like talking to parents of other kids who they may be going to parties at homes to or associating with on a regular basis, or monitoring what's going on in your own home. You know, we said earlier that kids tend to use alcohol at home. You know, they tend to get it. It's staggering when you look at the numbers of how many kids indicating the ones who drink are saying, hey, yeah, we're getting it at home at a certain time of the day, and our parents don't even know about it. So simple things like simply monitoring alcohol in your home, how much you have stored, you know, checking into it a couple times a week to see how much is actually in the cabinet, and then checking your kids to see what they've been doing, you know, asking them questions, doing some things to make sure you're involved. And that's why we say parent involvement is so important. It's not just being involved with things like academics and sports, but it's being involved with them on a social level as well, knowing what they're doing with the other kids and what they're doing when they're not at school and when they're not at home.
It's never too early to start talking to our kids, because the Surgeon General's call to action on underage drinking says that they need the information to make the decisions about 4 or 5 years before they're actually faced with the decision. So if our children in Louisiana are starting to drink at 11, then our elementary students need to be hearing why that's not good, and they need to be seeing parents who are presenting positive role model situations for them so that they are beginning to be prepared to make the right decision at 11 and 12 when they're faced with that first offer of alcohol.